a relevant subject matter that is very important in today's terms. Sales and finance, they do correlate and they come to meet. And this is a subject matter which we'll be discussing this morning. And I'm delighted to be joined by Anthony Tattan and Pat Lavelle in that regard. Just give you a background on Anthony, which he will do himself in a better way than I. But Anthony is a founder of Outsourced Sales Direct.ie and outsourcesalesdirect.co.uk. I think the context of sales cannot be understated in today's world. I do believe, and I'm from a generation of where sales was a different ilk, because we didn't have an awful lot of technology to work with in CRM systems and all that kind of stuff. But all that world has changed. I'm sure Anthony will give us an update on that. I'm also joined by Pat Lavelle, who is a board member of BITA, long-standing board member of BITA, currently involved in the South West, in the Galway chapter and in Dublin. But Pat has been a CFO rather, of both multinationals and family-owned businesses. Pat is on the Enterprise Ireland panel and provides business planning for their clients, and is also on the panel of business growth advisors. So good morning to you both.
Good morning, Paul. Good morning, everybody.
So if we could start, Anthony, and you could give us a background on your good self, and then we'll follow up with that with Pat. So just give us a background, Anthony, on yourself before we start on the subject matter of this seminar.
Very good. Thanks for the intro, Paul, and appreciate the opportunity to speak today. Like yourself, I'm a career salesman, and starting out 26, 27 years ago, I would have done commission-only door-to-door sales, gravitated after a couple of years into telesales, which was a little bit warmer and drier than door-to-door sales. And from there into software as it started to develop. I've been director of various companies, started up my own companies a couple of times. And then last year, after 10 years as a chief commercial officer of a tech company, I exited and liquidated my shareholding. And it was at that point, I guess, that chatting to a lot of people who approached me with job offers to become a sales director, it became very obvious to me that there's a shortage of experienced sales directors, but also on a fractional basis, like an outsourced CFO. If a company can get the benefits of an experienced sales director, but not necessarily having to hire them full time and have them join into the kind of the culture, sometimes the politics of the company, it's good to be able to have that external viewpoint. So I seem to be pushing against an open door. We've just secured another couple of directors to come onto the website as outsourced sales directors. So it's outsourcesalesdirector.ie, and we've purchased .co.uk as well, which will point at that. So we're very much focused on offering experienced sales directors on a fractional basis, very much similar to an outsourced CFO. And obviously that's where myself and Pat have been chatting about the synergies and the opportunities to work with companies. So hopefully that gives you a quick kind of overview as to where I sit at the moment, Paul.
Okay, and Pat, if you could just give us a background on yourself before we start, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of finding out how this actually journey works.
Sure, thanks, Paul. As you said, I've been CFO of several companies, both multinationals and family-owned businesses. The one thing that's probably common to all of those, and this wasn't by design, is that all of those were either underperforming or distressed businesses. So that's the kind of the background that I come to this with. For the last 5 years or so, I've been using that expertise to work with SMEs as a finance director, but on a part-time basis. I work with EFM, who are in the UK and Ireland. We have about 50 guys between the UK and Ireland doing what I do, offering outsourced CFO or FD services. So that would be tailored to the needs of each individual client. It could be anything from a few hours a month to a few days a month. So,
okay, well, I'm going to start in the middle. You asked me not to go off piece, Pat, and that's impossible for me. So, but I'm going to start in the middle because, you know, my feel for the whole sales side of things, but you also know the experience that you have in terms of other departments, i.e. the finance department. I'm going to ask you both this question, and I want your outlook on this question. And it's the causes of the politics between sales and other departments. What are the causes of politics between sales and other departments? That's to you first, Pat.
I suppose that the main cause of conflict or politics would probably be the whole credit control issue. And, whereas everybody, including finance, wants to see the top line growing. And indeed, every month, as CFO, it's the first thing I look at is the top line. Every accountant or accounts function will want to see that grow in as risk-free a way as possible. And that's the whole thing that tends to bring the two areas, sales and finance, into conflict the most, is that finance move cautiously. They want to go through credit control, the credit checking process, go through the application process, look for references, and in extreme cases refuse to give credit. But that's essential, obviously, to protect the company against losses. You'll never completely eliminate risk, but you must do your best to do so.
And Anthony, the same question to you.
For me, I believe it originates at the top of the company. So not necessarily the politics, but the absence of alignment and the absence of the importance that should be placed on sales and the sales team in the grand scheme of things in the company. Without revenue, the company's not going to survive. So when other departments don't understand the importance of supporting the sales efforts, they see the sales department or the sales team as almost an inconvenience sometimes, making their job difficult because they actually have to do some work because there's new sales coming in and they have to be onboarded or they have to whatever. That's an inconvenience. Then from my perspective, the fault lies with the company directors, the company owners in this instance. They should be directive. They should be communicating with middle management that how important it is to support the sales function. I could talk about this one all day, but that for me, it's very clear. It's the absence of alignment coming down from the top of the company that causes that.
Okay, we've seen in the past how successful the outsource of a CFO has benefited companies, and it's been great value for BITA to be able to talk to SMEs and medium-sized businesses and indeed large corporates in utilizing the outsource CFO function. In terms of Anthony, how does the outsourced sales director work as a service?
It's pretty much the same model. I would say it's identical. So I'd be working with some companies a day a week, half a day a fortnight, and it really depends. Other companies would just have you on a retainer, and you might pop in, every so often. But it's really more specific to companies that want a full-time sales director, but either can't justify it or can't find one. With 3.8% unemployment in Ireland at the moment, there's not exactly a huge amount of experienced sales directors sitting there waiting for a job offer. So, and if they are moving from a company, then they're probably looking for a large amount of a package to move from one company to the next. So, a company might not have that budget. They might not be able to justify it. They may not need it full time. They may have a good sales director a good sales manager, and they might have an owner or a board of directors who are dealing with all other aspects of the business. But there's a gap between the sales manager and the board of directors, and they just need somebody to come in, on a regular basis, sit with the board, work out what the strategy is for the company going forward, work with the manager on implementing the KPIs and the statistics to get all that and to work to get the best out of his or her sales team. So it's when there's a gap that's how it works best. Yep.
So would it be misleading for me to presume that if I engage with an outsourced sales director, that the sales performance of the company will automatically be improved?
When you say misleading, I mean adding an extra layer. What gets measured increases 100%. So if it's not currently being measured, or there's an obvious gap there, it's automatically going to increase. So your revenues are going to increase, but also the overall strategy, where the business is going, what's the direction. For a lot of companies, they're copy paste year on year. There's not a lot of direction or alignment in terms of a defined strategy for the business. Show me the business plan for the next 24 months, and you don't always get to see it. They may not have it, or they kind of tell you a story, but it's not documented. So just by getting that together and knowing where the business is going, you're automatically going to accelerate. Everybody's in the same boat then. They know where they're going. You're going to get that increase for sure.
And in specific to specific industries, what industries specifically benefit from your services?
If you'd asked me that 6 months ago, I would have said tech, software as a service, cloud. They would have been ideal. But I'm working with companies in all industries now. We've got companies coming in to chat to us about aligning their processes, and they're from retail, which I wouldn't have thought. Hospitality. It's more about the mindset, to be honest, Paul, rather than the type of company or the type of industry. You could have a company that's turning over 10 million and they can't wrap their head around somebody coming in and out of the business on a fractional basis. You could have a small business turning over 500,000 and they've got a very clear vision on what they're trying to achieve and would be much more open to it. So it's about mindset and perception rather than industry type or company type.
Okay, I've got a kind of a showcase here in the questionnaire. We have a company, it was a partnership, and the partnership is after breaking down. Within that company, one of the partners was very strong in sales, the other partner was very strong in finance. How can your outsourced sales director help this type of company?
So are we talking about both parties are still in the business?
No, the exit. So in other words, one of the strengths has been actually diminished by the exit of the partner.
Which partner?
On the sales side, obviously.
Well, that's an easy swap in for a swap out. So if one has left, the first thing we could do is step in and review the processes that are there, document them if they're not already documented. Start to give the sales team a focal point, somebody that's going to be coming in on a regular basis. They at least have predictability. They know what they're dealing with, and then look at the growth strategy and how they want to go at that. Establish a marketing budget, and away we go. I'm sure it's the same as when you go into a company, the first thing you're looking at is the P&L and the balance sheet, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So the first thing we do is a review. We would conduct a review. Usually a health check in a lot of cases, but yeah, a very high level review to see where the main issues are, where the main pressure points are.
Yeah.
So while concentrating on sales at the minute, and I will get to Pat on the other side of things, in terms of outsourced sales director, is there some benefits to having this on a part-time basis rather than on a full-time basis? And if they are, what are they?
Yeah, in some ways, I mean, you could argue both ways, and I'm going to be biased because this is my business, but the view from the outside in can be a much clearer view without being involved. We talked earlier about politics, culture, silos within companies and bickering or whatever term you want to put on it. But for somebody that's not involved in the day-to-day politics and gossip, they can see the wood for the trees in the business. Less time to form unnecessary relationships. They can be good or bad, but with other people in the company. So also, coming in on a regular basis, but not being there every day, you can distance yourself and ask those awkward questions and hold up the mirror to the owner or the board of directors or whoever it might be and say, I'm not happy with that answer. I don't see an alignment here. Let's stay in the room. Let's close the boardroom door and let's make sure that we get to the bottom of this and we get an alignment before we walk out of here. So I feel you don't quite get that if you're on the payroll and you're being told by the board, listen, you're a member of staff, so we come back to that. By coming in from the external, it's not about the client and their perspective. They can choose to terminate the contract with an outsourced sales director. But likewise, an outsourced sales director can turn around and fire the client if they're not happy. They're not, because it's not going to reflect well. We're not going to get the results from our clients if they're not on board. If we don't have that alignment, if they're not answerable is not the right term, but if we don't have that. That clarity that they're going to work together and respond accordingly. So yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot here now, Anthony, right? And give me some of the worst reasons for not closing a sale that should have closed.
I suppose top of the list would be, in terms of a sale, and this goes right back 25 years to my earliest memories of sales, you must have a roadmap or a structure to a sales call. And I say sales call, that could be a face-to-face client visit, or it could be over the phone. There's got to be steps in the roadmap, and that's got to be clear, defined structure to the call or the sale. If you don't have that, you're starting on the back foot. Selling the old ways versus the new strategies and methodologies, and there's new things coming out all the time. But layered on top of that is the likes of just talking too much. God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use them in that proportion, and it's basic stuff, but we know it, but we don't always use it. Nervousness when the question of cost comes up. How do I answer that? The prospect is questioning the cost. In the same way, trying to close the sale too early. Take your time, engage a relationship, ask questions. The more questions you ask, the more chance the prospect has to really get there with you. There's nothing worse than getting to the close and the customer's not with you. You've left them behind. Objections, being uncomfortable about objections. If they have objections, it's a good thing because you're at the close for sure. And a big one is other decision makers that it's not that you weren't aware, you didn't take the time to find out that there were other decision makers in the process. And now you're at the close and they need to go and talk to whoever it might be. So they would be some of the big ones, Paul.
In terms of the best way for companies to set up revenue goals and targets, let's speak about that for a little before I then talk to Pat about the other functions in terms of the finance side of things.
So just ask me that again, sorry.
What is the best way for companies to set up revenue goals and targets?
Okay, so again, you'd be surprised how many people think that targets and KPIs are just the concern of the sales team. This should originate from the top down, and it should be based on the goals for the business, and that should come from the boardroom, whether that's an owner, one person ownership team, or whether it's a board of directors. They should define the direction that the company is taking based on what their vision is for the business. Are they hoping to sell the business in 3 years' time? Are they hoping to have a possible merger or an acquisition? And so that direction should be defined, and then the sales team or the sales director or sales manager should be brought in and told, we're hoping to have achieve a target of 10 million by 2025 or whatever it might be, and we're sitting at 6 million. How are we going to get there? But that's our goal. Okay, well, we need more headcount, we need a marketing budget. So those decisions can be made once everybody knows what direction the company is and what the strategic goal for the company is 3 years, 5 years down the line. Then you can bring that down to a micro level and work out what each individual sales guy or girl's KPIs, targets should be. But to just put that on a sales manager is folly. It's got to start from the top and then work its way down.
Okay, so let's talk about the finance things though a bit more, Pat, in terms of what your role is. What type of work do you do with your clients and what do you bring to a company?
Okay, so what we do is very different to the work that your external auditor or accountant does. We don't do the compliance stuff. I have been in industry for most of my career. So, I've worked on the shop floor. I know what it's like to work actually in an operating business. We're there to help clients run their finance function, to help them manage the working capital, help them manage the day-to-day cash flow, to be a trusted advisor when there's decisions to be made or when there's problems to be solved. We help them understand how their business is performing, why it's performing that way, and identify changes that might need to be made. So it's an in-house finance director. The companies that we work with could neither justify nor afford a full-time finance director. So this is a solution to that. And as I say, I have people that I work with for a few hours a month, and I have people I work with for a few days a month.
In terms of the first thing, what do you look at first when you're starting with a new client? What's the first roadmap?
I think the most important thing in any business is obviously cash flow, and I think every business should maintain a rolling 12-month cash flow forecast. Now that would ideally be in a lot of detail for the next 3 months, and at a higher level out for the following 9 months. Now, what that does is it helps you to plan your cash flow, obviously, but the most important function it performs, in my view, is that it will identify potential cash flow issues or shortages sooner rather than later. So if you see, by doing this exercise, you've got a problem in 6 months' time, you can start planning for it now, rather than not having that system in place and discovering some Monday afternoon that you're going to have difficulty making payroll this Friday afternoon.
And I suppose, for many companies, including BITA ourselves, one of the greater areas of problem for us was our own growth. So for a new or growing business, how do you manage the growth and maintain the financial stability at the same time?
Okay, the first thing I do is set a goal. All right, we encourage clients to do is to set a goal, then to make a plan, monitor that plan, and take action based on the feedback coming from that plan. I think the putting pen to paper and writing out a plan is a really, really useful tool. The very act of putting pen to paper brings an incredible clarity of thinking. So as I say, have a goal and a plan to support it. A clear goal will give you energy and focus, and that will be real when you're going through tough patches. A sound, well-prepared plan will also give you confidence and a roadmap to get to your goal, and it will show you the resources that you need to deliver upon that goal. So I would break it down. Then I would say, first of all, sit down and have your goal, have a look at where you see the business in 3 to 5 years' time, and then get down into the dirty, do a budget for the next 12 months, and then commit to doing something every day that moves you towards your goal. Because a lot of people will get tied up in the day-to-day activities of the business and miss the big picture. So do something every day that moves you towards that big goal. And
in terms of the warning signs, Pat, what are the early warning signs of a business in stress?
So liquidity issues, obviously, your cash flow management is becoming a challenge. Supplier issues, you're coming into conflict with suppliers. They putting you on hold or are reluctant to supply. Reduction in profitability, your costs are going up and you're not able to match it with increases in pricing. Tax arrears, low bank debt arrears, rent arrears, all of those are starting to accumulate. Bank covenants, you're looking like you're going to default in your bank covenants if you haven't already done so. Management not fully understanding their cost base. Management firefighting and dealing with problems all the time rather than driving the business. Reluctance to take the difficult actions, and low staff morale, and the good people starting to leave.
And if you're experiencing any of these, like this is what we wanted to do today, was just have a general conversation around these things. But if this is resonating with some people in the room and outside of the room, what should you do if you're experiencing any of these signs?
First thing to do is to take action immediately. Do not ignore these signs. Take action, take advice, talk to somebody like me. We may be able to put your mind at rest. We certainly will be able to help. But I urge you, do not delay, because the sooner you start to deal with these things, the better your chances of getting through them. So that's the first thing, is just to don't hesitate, take action. Back to the cash flow forecasts. They're really critical in this situation. You need to understand what's your cash burn rate, and you need to look at reducing that to a level that's manageable. Make sure you have up-to-date information on the company's finances. That's really important, because once you're on notice that the company is in difficulty, the directors are exposed. So you need to make sure you're very, very well informed and well advised. So make sure you have up-to-date financial information. Figure out if this can be fixed, and again, you will need it. I think you should take advice, independent advice, in relation to this. The primary question here is the underlying business viable? If it's not, can you make it viable? If the answer to both of those is no, then clearly you're at the end. But if it is viable or can be made viable, then identify what are the actions that you need to take to fix this issue, and get on with it. Finally, and most important of all, communication. It's absolutely vital. There is a temptation to stick your head in the sand. Do not do that. It's important that you communicate early and often with all of the stakeholders, employees, suppliers, bankers, all of those people. I have found through experience that if you're forthright and honest with people, they will surprise you with their support.
So finally, just to wrap up, because what we're going to do now is we're going to go back into the room ourselves, and if anybody has questions, both Anthony and Pat will be available on a table for a few minutes for you to ask specific questions to them. In terms of outsourcing a CFO and a sales director, is this compatible to do at the same time? I'll ask you that first, Pat.
I think absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you were working as a CFO full-time in a company, you would be working with a sales director. Absolutely. And I think it's the two work very closely together. We were talking about budgets earlier on. That would be the CFO and the sales director working together. But also, as you go through the year, understanding the variances, working with the sales director. What is the reason for the variances? Can this be corrected? Can it be improved upon? The whole area of pricing, it has to be done in conjunction with the sales director. So yes, I think that the two, in my experience, do work closely together.
Anthony, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I think a sales director is also going to be looking at not just what ways he can get more out of the existing sales team, but also they're going to need to understand what kind of budgets they have available to them. And if both the sales director and the finance director, whether they be outsourced or not, don't have a good working relationship, that's going to break down. It's going to be problematic. You're going to have those politics that we were talking about earlier. So it's important, and again, that has to come from the top down. But it's important that both parties work very, very closely together. So whether it's outsourced or internal, I don't think it makes a difference. In fact, in some ways, as I mentioned earlier, there's probably benefits to being external.
Okay, so to summarize, I mean, BITA as an organization is all about value. The value in terms of that we bring to our membership is information and communication and sharing better practice and capital knowledge. And this has been an example of something that is very close to me in terms of my own sales career, but in terms of the value that BITA and BITA members can benefit from. So I'd like to thank Anthony for joining us, and Pat, and sharing their knowledge and capital knowledge on this area. I'd now invite us to go back to the room, and if anybody has any questions for the next 5 or 10 minutes, Laura, perhaps you can transport us back into the room on our wonderful Relook platform, and we can continue our journey in this way. Thank you.
I would. Thanks very much, everybody. I've made